Ascension is full of interesting people who I think have something worthwhile to say. So I'm doing this series called Insights from Within, and I'm going to be interviewing members of Ascension in it. My hope for you is that you can listen with open ears, coming to an understanding of our fellow brothers and sisters better, and of course grow in your own faith as well. The topics in this series will vary widely, but the goal remains the same, to come to know one another. Today, I'm happy to be talking with Tom Johnson, and we're going to be talking about faith and what it is to be a black Christian in a predominantly white church. We are blessed to have Tom in our church as a leader. He's got a unique understanding and history on race and faith, and so I think this is going to be a good discussion. Let's open with prayer, shall we, Tom?
Let's pray.
Holy God, you make us in your image. In our conversation, help us to better know one another and then, therefore, know you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Tom, it's good to see you. Glad you're here today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So, you grew up in the Episcopal Church.
Absolutely.
Tell me what growing up in the Episcopal Church was like for you.
Well, my dad's Baptist. My dad was Baptist. My mother grew up Episcopalian. Her parents were Episcopal out of Philadelphia. So, very similar to growing up in a Lutheran church. I've picked up. Maybe not as many potlucks. We don't seem to be in love with Jell-O as much, but it seems like I could go to one service, whether it's any Episcopal church, I can follow along. I can go to any Lutheran church and follow along. So
I remember you saying once that when you first started going to church with Darcy, you knew the Apostles' Creed. And I don't know if that made her like fall in love with you or amazed by you, but she was fascinated that you just like could say the creed.
This heathen, yeah, because I did confirmation. I went to catechism. Episcopals skew a little more toward Catholicism, so I remember my confirmation doesn't look anything like what we do here. We lived in Clark Air Base, Philippines. It was Father Titus, it was me and him and one other young man, and so we got it all. And I guess it brought me back. I did stop going to church for a while, so after meeting Darcy, it brought me back. So I knew it was important.
That's cool. Part of what we're going to be talking about, of course, is it's no secret we are a fairly white church. By church, I mean the ELCA and Ascension. Yeah. And we're blessed to have you as a black leader in the church. You've done some looking and research and learning for yourself about sort of the history of what it is to be a black Christian in America. Can you share some of that history that you find important that people should know?
Everybody has to remember that for at least my ancestors and other people of color, we were kind of brought here. And so we had our own systems, our own societies, civilizations, and religions. And so coming here, basically Sundays was taught to be the day, and you can check throughout history and whether it's, Alex Haley's Roots or just normal stories, you can see where that faith was grown. At least for the black community, it was pretty important because for most people, Sunday was untouchable. And that's when everybody came together.
It's kind of odd because it was sort of thrust upon the black community, upon slaves first, right? Like they didn't come, they were brought over and then forced Christianity upon them. But I like the way you talk about Sunday being this like special holy day that they were forced and also given, and then they sort of seized for themselves. It sounds like.
Yeah, basically.
Was that still true for you growing up? Like Sunday was the day, or did that persist over the centuries?
For my family, I don't know if Sundays were the day. Me growing up, it was kind of interesting. And I used to think I was not that unique because, sure, you went to church growing up, then sometime around 15 or 16, you started going, I got other stuff to do, or I'm a little too tired, or, and then hopefully you come back. What I see with black people, they have picked up on Sundays, and Sundays is, if you look at, I guess most families, I'm going to say, Sunday's a pretty big day.
Yeah.
And, and at least from my observation, there's a hierarchy involved. Whether you've seen movies like, is it Barbershop or Stella Got the Groove Back or whatever, where you couldn't start eating until the pastor got there. You couldn't go around until he got his food first. And those things were I think, are still important.
Like these rituals that exist long past the worship service.
Yeah, and so what it has also forced a lot of black people to do is study the Word and study it and then ask questions and go, well, this isn't making sense. Help me out with this, as we're trying to struggle to have, speaking for myself, as I'm trying to struggle to have better faith.
I want to switch gears a little. When I first really got the idea of wanting to talk to you kind of this way, I don't know if you even know this, but was when we had this conversation back in the spring. So this was, it was actually a conversation you had with your son. Do you have a son, 21? Is it Alan?
26 now.
26?
Yeah,
my gosh, I'm way
exactly.
off. Sorry about that. So Alan is 26,
26.
and this was shortly after Ahmaud Arbery was killed. At least that's how I remember it.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't remember, Ahmaud Arbery was a black man. I can't remember where he lived. Do you remember?
It wasn't Louisville, but it was someplace in the South. He was jogging through, looking through some houses on a run, just looking through houses that are being built. Wasn't looking through houses where people were living. It was under construction houses. A couple people ran him down, shot him.
Yeah.
Just horridly. And I wanted to talk to Alan because at that time our country was that was March, so we were in the year 3 going on to year 4 of really, I don't know, tinderbox sort of situation where it wasn't going to take much. And I worry about a lot of people. Anybody in my village I worry about. I worry about Alan in particular because Alan's that kid. He's special needs, and he is black, and he does wear hoodies, and he's the nicest person in the world. Yeah. But he also could be jogging in the middle of the night through a neighborhood, and someone would go, "What's that?" But on the other side, he could also jump in and be on the other side of rebel rousing, for the lack of a better word. And I think that day I wanted to sit down with Alan and try to go, this is real, but we can't stoop. I think that was my purpose of.
It's really interesting to me because I've been following the Ahmaud Arbery case pretty closely because I'm a runner, and so there's lots of talk in the running world, like on websites and Facebook groups and whatnot, about how the running world is like the church, like the Lutheran church, predominantly white. Right. And some people saying, well, this might be why is a lot of people aren't feeling safe running. And Ahmaud Arbery is going to be another example of that. So I was thinking of it that way. And then when you came in with Alan, and I was honored that you came in and talked with Alan and with me there. Right. I was a little blown away because it was it was almost like you were trying to help make sure Alan understood it. But in doing that in front of me, it helped me understand just sort of the fear you had almost.
I'm trying to remember why I came here. I think there's a lot of stuff that was happening. Number one, I was trying to ground Alan. Yeah. I worry about Alan. He is special needs. He is 26, and he is black. And so as things were getting up there, and this was before Elijah McClain, I think. And so, I wanted to make sure that Alan didn't get provoked into getting into a situation he couldn't get out of, and that he needs. Alan's a special case because not only is he African American or black, and regardless of what folks may think, that's a burden. Yeah. He's also special needs, and that's a burden we can all agree on. And so, in the time that I've known Alan, since he's been 13 or 14, I've tried to teach him that both are burdens, both are who you are, both can't paralyze you, but you have to watch out. You have to he has to pay attention to wearing a hoodie at 7-Eleven, because he is that kid, and I wanted him to, number one, realize where safe places were. I wanted to bring him here so he knew he has friends that live around the corner. He doesn't live too far away from here, and I'm always trying to message with Alan when I think when Alan's getting a little cyclical in his moods. I always like to ground him and remind him, okay, here are people that you may not know them, but they know who you are. And so if you come in here and say, I need some help, and they go, oh, you're Tom and Darcy's, and you go, yes. And so that was part of the purpose that I wanted to have, was tying both in. And so Alan knew. What I worry about most with Alan is I won't be here tomorrow. And so I won't be, maybe I won't be here tomorrow, and I don't need Alan going nuts and getting killed the next day. I need Alan to remember some stuff to where he can come back to it and go, okay, that's what's going on.
It felt to me like you were trying to make sure Alan knew that this is awful, but it's how the world is right now.
Yeah.
And that he needs to be smart about how he approaches it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that like I don't have a 26-year-old child, but I'm sure that it takes a lot of times to get that. It takes a lot of times for all of us to understand these sorts of things. But I felt like he was getting it, he was really I see how this could be really dangerous and how things can escalate. and I felt like I was right there with Alan. I was like, oh, I get it now better. And for me, what was meaningful for me was just seeing both your compassion, your love for your son, and also just your, I don't know if fear is the right word, but anxiety, but just how the world is, and you want to be sure he's smart about the world.
I do have fear. I have fear about all of us. This has been the craziest 5 years of my life. Yeah. And so during the year of 2020, I guess during this year, I went, okay, Alan, not only does Alan need to know this, but I think a lot of folks need to know this, and I think a lot of folks need to have compassion. I'm always, I don't want to say I'm always looking for places to offer compassion, but I do realize how I come across. And so when I walk into places, I want to make sure that what I say is different than how my first impression may be. But you got to know that. Alan needs to know that unfortunately in America today, Alan needs to know that his skin color, he's going to have to explain that. And he may not have, not in words, but in actions. And so when he does go jogging, or he does put on a hoodie and flips his hood up because it's 10 degrees outside, he's got to pay attention, because it just happens. And not that it's right or wrong, it's just how it is right now.
I often wear a hoodie at night when I walk our dog. Yeah. And I've thought of it differently ever since that day, putting that hood on. And so I appreciate it. I also like what you say, though, that you're helping Alan to know that there's both this horrible circumstances of how the world is, but that there are these safe places that he can come to. And you talk about the church as one of those places, which I think is kind of interesting, because you've told me sometimes that you're not always comfortable in the church either. You talked about a wedding recently that you went to.
Well, no,
Tell me about this wedding if you can.
I didn't go to it.
You didn't? That's right, you didn't.
I didn't go to it, and it caused some issues in my household, and it probably still does. But and not that I don't love these people. I mean, my wife was invited to a wedding, and it was for a young lady who is her best friend's niece. Yeah. And
out of state.
Well, no, they came from out of state. Scotts Bluff, Nebraska came to town. Okay. And so, and it was at the same time as Breonna Taylor's, I think the folks just it didn't go as well, or I shouldn't say well. It was just people were upset about that, and people were they were very
Isn't it long after
alienated.
George Floyd's
Yeah,
death?
3 months after George Floyd, and we're also in the midst of this pandemic, which somehow got politicized.
Yeah.
And I woke up and went, I don't feel comfortable going to this wedding at all, and let me try to explain why. That was a hard explanation that was a hard talk for me and my wife to have. Mm-hmm. I'm not 100% sure she totally understands it, but I don't think I expect her anymore to. I was trying to, number one, it was COVID, but number two, I'm the only black guy and about 100 people there. I'm not feeling all that comfortable this year, putting myself in that situation more times than I have to. Especially with how vocal folks were about that whole deal. I didn't quite understand it. And so there's times, I didn't show up last night at a meeting last night. So sometimes it just happens where I flake, but there's times where it's a little overwhelming. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
Even though I walk in, I know everybody.
So yeah, I mean so like at a wedding where you knew a lot of the people, but you wouldn't have known everyone there. You just felt uncomfortable being around a bunch of people you didn't know. You knew you were probably going to be the only black guy there. And you're saying that you can even have that experience at church, in a church that you know and love, and you know people here love
absolutely.
you. Yeah.
Well, and there's little bits and pieces at times where I go, I wonder what's up. Yeah, it happens. How far do we want to get into this?
Well, for me, it's more about understanding that feeling you're having and that sense, right? That because, right, like I grew up in this congregation, I look like everyone else in this congregation, and so like the idea that walking through doors wouldn't be anything but just like easy and straightforward. And for you, like there's a lot of people who don't feel that way because they're not used to like church. Right. That's not you, right?
That's
you grew up
me.
Episcopalian. This is easy church.
Yeah, this is Sunday school. I shouldn't say Sunday school. This is church without it. We're not as Catholic as the Catholics are. We're kind of in between, but I do want to see a collar.
Yeah.
I do like.
So like church you're comfortable with.
Yeah, church I'm comfortable with.
But even in situations where you know a lot of the people, being the only or one of the few black guys in the room is still nerve-wracking.
It can be.
Is it all eyes are on you? Is it like what? If you're able to, and I know it's really hard, explain that feeling.
It depends. It depends. Yeah. Number one, Darcy said it to me perfectly once. She pointed out that when she goes to my family's for Thanksgivings, she's the only white person there. And I go, okay, I get that. And then I have to deconstruct it backwards. So it's kind of that. It's kind of... a lot of it has to do with what politics is blowing outside. A lot of it has to do with are they going to hear my message? Do they hear me? Do folks is there a separate? Is there a separation between? No, that's only Tom. Darcy's grandmother told this great. I love Goldie to death. Yeah. She was from Sidney, Nebraska, and one day she's telling me. She's showing me this new place she's living at, new retirement community. And so-and-so lives here, and so-and-so lives there, and the Chinaman lives there. And I looked at Goldie and I said, I don't think we can say that anymore. She goes, why? He's from China. And I went, okay, well, later in the day or later on, they pointed out to Goldie, well, what if someone said, Darcy's husband's the black guy that lives in the corner. He's from Africa. And she looked at me and she goes, you're just Tom. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay. And so that always gave me insight on Goldie and insight of a lot of people because there's an acceptance there, but let's not get too comfortable and forget about some of this. Did I answer that?
Even like it's almost like even when you're coming to a place where people love you and we know each other and we can laugh together, you're still the only black guy in the room.
Yeah.
And that fact of your race doesn't ever go away.
Never, ever.
Not even when you're surrounded by people. And same as like Darcy, right? Like she's your family. It's your family. Right. They love her. You guys have known each other forever.
I love her more than they love me.
Yeah, well, who wouldn't? But even in that midst, she still feels like this a little bit uncomfortable aspect about it.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's anything we're doing wrong to cause that, but it's just
how it is.
It's how it is, and that pains me, I'll be honest. It's hard to know that's true. It feels like we are not yet the kingdom God envisions. When that's true. You know?
True. Because I got a lot of questions. All right? And so I think what it does when Darcy tells me she's uncomfortable with the Johnsons, which we're a weird bunch. I get it. All right? It makes me want to pay attention a little bit more to make sure that in our comfort, we aren't doing anything. We aren't not hearing her. All right? And so as we segue, what I find here is that, number one, I'm pretty visible and I have a big mouth when I want to use it. And when I want to be known, I can be known. The greatest gift this congregation has given me, and the scariest thing, is I'm a worship deacon.
I was going to ask you.
No, it's the best gift ever, and the scariest thing I do, period.
You were sweating bullets the first time you did it.
I sweat bullets every time I do it. And I want to, number one, there's a lot of stuff that goes along. Number one, I just don't want to fall flat on my face.
So why do you do it? If it was nerve-wracking for you, I asked you to do it, and you did not say yes right away. You were nervous to say yes. So what made you say yes to do it? Why?
Well, I think when you emailed me, I said, let me pass this on to Darcy. You obviously are trying to get a hold of her because that's her role. Why am I nervous to do it? Because you were asking me to look at my faith. You were challenging my faith, and I've gotten along 50 years not really being challenged with it. You know, where my wife challenges me. Darcy, when we got married, that's how I met Wayne Weisenbuehler, who
was a pastor.
Who was ELCA bishop, was he not? And so when Darcy worked up at Bethany Lutheran, Wayne, he and I became great friends, and so he challenged my faith. And whose faith wants to be challenged? All right,
that's what I do, Tom. I challenge your faith.
You and Dan's and maybe Gabrielle Brown's, but other than that, I can't think. My faith doesn't want to be challenged, and so then you challenged it. What can I do to serve? Because I'm very comfortable sitting in the back. I'm very comfortable sitting right there and laughing with the kids and leaving immediately after the service. You asked me not to do that, and
I'm glad you stepped out on that limb and said yes. I'm glad for today. I think before we go on to the last question, you mentioned about when Darcy is with your family, trying to do your best to help ease her discomfort.
Yeah.
And I think that's a calling to us as the church, for you and for others, excuse me, maybe who are other people of color in the church, or people who are not used to the bells and whistles of the liturgy, that sort of thing, to try and help make this a place where they feel welcome and comfortable. The last thing I want to ask you is, we talked about this before. Obviously, we planned some of this out before we were today. You kind of started saying here that you've had your faith challenged, and since meeting Darcy and Wayne Weisenbuehler and coming here, your faith has grown and been challenged. And then at the same time, the last 5 or so years, you've said you've really been deeply moved by these stories that you've been seeing in the news and learning about racial violence and injustice in our country. And so I'm kind of curious about your growing faith and your growing understanding of that injustice in our country. And as a Christian, what do you see when you look out at our country, especially as a Black American? What do you see in this country? What do you see?
All right, that's a lot of number one.
That's a big question, I know.
We don't know what we're doing. All right, that we are talking a good game, but we aren't playing the same game that we're talking.
Say more. I don't quite understand. What about what?
The reason why the reason why I continue to come to Ascension is that, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, where I was fortunate enough to sit on some of these committees and learn about the church and learn about the history of it and see the struggles and falls and know what our DNA is about, it made me more comfortable to speak out. It made me more comfortable to go, okay, well, I hear you saying this. This is how you're treating folks that look like me. And let's connect. When we walk out this building, let's connect it to what we're saying inside. And I don't know if we're that good at it yet. When, you know, the 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago, where we did all the work on, you know,
our purpose and our mission and that,
the beacon of light. I'll the rest of my life, Daniel Holt holding up the thing, holding up the candle and explaining. That made sense to me, that we don't have that many beacons of light. So if we're going to be the beacon of light, okay, but are we all listening to one another? I'm very guilty of not listening to everybody. I'm wondering if everybody, as I'm skirting your question, I wonder, as I'm saying we're not good at listening, because I do wonder that. I do wonder if where faith stops. That's the biggest thing in the last 5 years of my life, is watching where faith stops and other things take over. And so I have questions about that. If we're coming in here and we're supposed to be a faith-driven person, why does it stop with politics? Or why does it stop when we walk out the door? Why does it stop with, no, we can't rescue all the people on the streets. But why does it stop there? Because it doesn't make sense to me. You know,
It sounds like you're saying what you see when you look out at our community and in our world, that our faith drives us, but then has these places where it doesn't enter.
Yes.
And how our core values of what we believe and who we believe God is haven't, I'm going to be the optimist, haven't yet had that impact.
Because there's so much I've learned from a lot of people here, whether they know it or not. And there's whether it's little Kyla, and I watch her come in, and I learn from here, all the way up to D. Yoakum. If that's the ages of our congregation, I've learned from everything here. So now I've got some questions, because I want to. Okay, you're asking me to be open-minded, you're asking me to be giving, you're asking me to forgive my fellow man, you're pushing me up in a sweaty haze to give prayers, which is absolutely my favorite thing to do. By far, reading what you guys read for us to say, that's great, but does it count? All right, does it count, or you go, oh, you know, I don't really like this, because I'm listening to everybody, and I'm trying to, whether I agree with you or not, I'm trying to learn. And so what I've found is, why doesn't everybody else do it, but let's hear each other out.
When we were talking about this today and earlier, I get the sense that when you look out at our country, you see a lot of fear among one another.
Yeah.
And it sounds like what you're telling me now is you see a lot of fear, and you're not seeing a lot of faith, a lot of use of faith to address that fear that we're having in our country, especially around racial injustice, but in lots of different places.
Well, racial injustice, or the caste system, or whatever folks want to call it, in order to make it. Okay, we can't say race.
I like that, the caste
we can't say race, because people drop into balls. You go, listen, do you know how and they immediately go, I'm not, and they drop into a ball, and I totally get it. So let's talk about caste. Let's talk about that we've gotten used to seeing one another, different groups on these different levels. I'm not sure if that's right or wrong, but what we're trying to do now is say, hey, you know, we've gone through a lot. In our faith, it shouldn't be divided like this. In our faith, when we walk in, we're all equal, correct? And so why, if that's our calling, if that's what we're supposed to be doing, what does it miss? What's the missing link as we walk out the door?
Sure.
Because I see a lot of fear. I see a ton of fear out there. Fear from both sides. fear from, I can't explain the last 4.5 years at all, except for that, that there, so many people are frightened of losing what they have, if that makes sense. And I'm not sure that's what we're supposed to be doing. I'm not sure, I don't know the Bible as well as you, but I'm pretty sure there's passages in there where we're not supposed to be all that worried about what we have presently, because that will be provided for. I have to be talked into that, but I don't know.
I think I'm going to pull us to a close. We're lucky that one of the goals here is that this is a discussion that leads to more discussion. Right? And so some of you will be able to discuss this right after watching this video in an adult ed time, and Tom's going to be with us for that, and I'm thankful for that. But I really appreciate just like you're being willing to be open with this and to help us a little bit get a sense of how you see the church, this church, and the world through your eyes. I really appreciate that.
I appreciate being welcomed here. This is you signed up for Darcy, you got me.
2 for the price of 1.
2 for the price of 1.
We're the lucky ones. Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.